Buddhism for Today, The Essential Wisdom of the Threefold Lotus Sutra by Nikkyo Niwano. Part 2, The Sutra of the Lotus Flower of the Wondrous Dharma, Chapter 17, Specification of Merit. The previous chapter, The Lifespan of the Eternal Tathagata, taught us that the eternal original Buddha is always with us. The realization that the Buddha is constantly by our side naturally transforms our minds. Before we've attained real faith, we often find ourselves walled in by insecurity, unable to maintain an unshakable sense of self-confidence and hope for our lives. Even in the absence of such faith, there are times when people feel upbeat about their lives. People are certainly not entirely lacking in hope or self-confidence. Thanks to our personalities, circumstances, and age, some of us have the carefree optimism of youth. We are full of hope and self-reliance. Even if we have all of these, however, in point of fact, they are all fleeting, often shattered as soon as some great misfortune befalls us. The kind of person who looks at things superficially and never gives any thought to the meaning of life may be able to lead a happy-go-lucky existence, believing, live for today, tomorrow never comes. But most of the people who think like this lack any sense of responsibility toward society, their families, or even themselves. On the face of it, they seem to be happy, but their way of life, preoccupation with their own happiness and well-being, runs counter to the truth of non-self, and they fail to accumulate good karma in this world while sleepwalking through shallow lives. The merits of religious practice. The optimistic hope and self-confidence of those who have attained real faith are not so fragile or superficial, but are robust and deeply rooted. These people are supported by an inexhaustible peace of mind, afforded by the realization that no matter what may happen, they are protected and sustained by an absolute existence, the eternal original Buddha. They are resilient, calm, and collected people who cannot be broken or intimidated by fires or floods, and not even by weapons. It is natural for our lives to change dramatically when we attain such a state of mind. Indeed, it is impossible not to change when our attitude undergoes such a shift. Faith reorients our consciousness, which in turn reshapes how we live. This transformation is the merit of religious practice. Faith is naturally accompanied by merit. The merit of religious practice does not manifest simply in a person's mind, but also in their body and in the material circumstances of their lives. People's minds, bodies, and material environments are all interrelated and resonate with one another, so our bodies change along with our minds, and the circumstances of our lives should also improve accordingly. There is no mystery. It is illogical to believe that spiritual practice produces merits in the human mind, while not believing that physical and material benefits also accrue. Medicine has made remarkable progress in the study of the relationship between the human mind and the body. The field of holistic medicine has convincingly demonstrated that many ailments that would seem at first glance to be unrelated to mental and emotional health, eye diseases, skin conditions, heart problems, hypertension, and so forth, can have mental and emotional causes. The impact of mental and emotional states is particularly strong on the digestive tract. For example, constant anxiety and irritation are sometimes more responsible for people's gastric ulcers than other causes. Physicians in Japan have compiled statistics showing that students often experience appendicitis when a prolonged state of tension is suddenly released, such as after university entrance exams or an important sports event. It is no wonder that people recover from various conditions by changing their state of mind, since the body and mind are inseparable. I myself have personally witnessed many examples of this phenomena, including one case in which a person who had lost the use of her legs was able to stand up and walk home on her own after just a few words of spiritual advice. I do not consider such an event something miraculous, but simply a natural occurrence. It is also no wonder that people may experience financial or material blessings owing to a change in their attitude after embarking on a life of spiritual practice. Changing one's state of mind inevitably leads to a transformation in attitude towards one's work, and this brings about a general improvement in one's life. Such changes are not limited to an individual's life alone. The atmosphere that people of deep faith create with their presence is different from that created by other people, because they are optimistic, approach life with confidence, and have a positive attitude toward everything. Their face, speech, and conduct naturally express this brightness, and the way in which those around such people look at them also starts to change. Family, friends, and acquaintances begin to trust and feel inexplicably drawn to them. Thus, It is only a natural progression that their career begins to go well, and they are blessed with material wealth as a result. These are the merits that manifest as a result of true religious practice, and when they appear, we should receive them with unassuming gratitude. We need not be bound by the uncompromising attitude of those who say that, because faith is a matter of the heart and mind, we have no need for any merits other than spiritual ones, lest our religious lives be tainted by some kind of impurity. This kind of thinking is itself an incoherent bias. But people who think this way are actually relatively rare. Many more are of another sort, believers whose faith is preoccupied with tangible merits. They do not understand that worldly benefits are the result of religious practice, but instead make obtaining such tangible benefits the aim of their faith from the very start. Almost all people who begin practicing a religious faith are facing some kind of suffering. It is natural for them to want to free themselves from their suffering, and we should not blame them for this. But when people have in mind nothing but the goal of recovering from illness or gaining monetary benefits, they are in fact obsessed with sickness and poverty. Although they ostensibly want to escape from these problems, they become trapped by both because their minds grip the idea of illness and poverty so tightly that it is impossible for them to let go. People who engage in Buddhist practices only so they can receive these kinds of worldly benefits easily regress on their path. They do not have complete faith in the Buddha, that is, they are not convinced that the Buddha is always with them. Lacking that immense peace of mind, they are obsessed with the problems at hand. If practical material benefits do not quickly materialize, they begin to doubt the teaching or lose interest. There are also some people who, despite having faith, purifying their hearts, and devoting themselves to bodhisattva practice for the benefit of others and the wider society, still cannot completely exhaust the past karma from their former lives, and the many material benefits do not manifest in their present lives. Even in such cases, if people who truly believe in the infinite lifespan of the original Buddha are also confident that they themselves have Buddha nature, and that their Buddha nature likewise possesses an infinite lifespan, they will be able to live with great self-confidence. They are absolutely sure that if they continue on this path of religious practice, they will certainly extinguish their past karma and approach Buddhahood step by step. Even if they do not immediately recover from illness or suddenly receive the blessings of material benefits, their hearts are composed and at peace. To others, they may seem to be suffering, but within their own hearts, they have been liberated from suffering. This is the outlook of people of deep faith. When considering the merits of spiritual practice, we must place great importance on being upright in character, as well as being gentle and flexible in mind, as Chapter 16 teaches. We should just focus ourselves exclusively on the Buddha, without being overly concerned with worldly benefits, attain a sense of oneness with the Buddha, and willingly conduct ourselves as the Buddha guides us. If as a result of this practice, there is a change in the reality of our lives, it is the natural manifestation of our minds and actions having been set in the direction of truth, and we can receive such merits with unassuming gratitude. The merits of spiritual practice are explained in the following 3 chapters of the latter half of the Lotus Sutra. This chapter, Specification of Merits, Chapter 18, The Merits of Rejoicing, and Chapter 19, The Merits of the Teachers of the Dharma. As we read all 3 of these chapters, we should bear in mind the fundamental meaning of merits discussed above. This chapter explains the merits we can obtain through a firm conviction in the infinite lifespan of the Buddha, and does so by dividing these merits into 12 levels. At the same time, it teaches the ideal religious life in fine detail. The merits explained in this chapter are not so-called worldly benefits, but are for the most part the merits that manifest in the hearts and minds of people of faith. Those who are not familiar with the Buddha Dharma may not yet understand what spiritual merits are, but readers who have studied the Lotus Sutra through Chapter 16 will appreciate the precious value of merits. Let us now turn to the main subject of the chapter. The many living beings in the assembly obtained unparalleled abundant merit, in the words of the sutra, vast and extensive great benefits, when they learned from Shakyamuni Buddha's exposition of Chapter 16 that the original Buddha's lifespan is limitless and that the original Buddha has always been present in the world, working to lead all living beings everywhere. The abundant benefit these countless living beings receive is the conviction that they are given the gift of life and are sustained, protected, and guided by the Buddha, and because of this, they experience a profound sense of joy. At the opening of the chapter, the Buddha explains to Maitreya Bodhisattva, who is the representative of all the Bodhisattvas in the Great Assembly, the merits of those who believe in the infinite lifespan of the Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha divides these merits into 12 levels according to the person's degree of faith and understanding. The 12 levels of merits. Cognition of non-origination. The Buddha describes the first level of merits to Maitreya, telling him, in the exact language of the sutra, that living beings as numerous as 6,800,000 million myriads times the sand of the Ganges attain the cognition of non-origination. Non-origination is an abbreviated term for non-origination and non-annihilation, which is also translated in more readily understandable language as no birth and no death. Birth and death indicates arising and perishing, or change. Thus, no birth and death, or non-origination, means that nothing that exists actually arises in the first place, nor does it perish. To clarify, while all things arise from causes and conditions, the sequence of these causes and conditions extends so far back into the infinite past that it is essentially without beginning. Furthermore, while all things are impermanent in that they never remain the same, through the process of ceaseless change and transformation, they perpetually move forward into the infinite future with no end. This is infinite life in the Buddhist sense. The term cognition here is a translation of the Sanskrit word ksanti, which usually means forbearance, but in this case indicates a kind of acceptance of truth. The cognition of non-origination is a type of forbearance, because it is a conviction that is firmly established and does not easily waver. To summarize, regarding the infinite lifespan of the Buddha, the cognition of non-origination means firmly believing that the lifespan of the eternal original Buddha is timeless, neither arising nor ceasing, with no beginning and no end. Those who attain this unshakable faith in the infinite lifespan of the Buddha, a life that we ourselves share, will never suffer through the ups and downs of becoming overly elated or unduly disheartened, no matter the changes in their personal or social circumstances. They will move beyond the extremes of oscillating emotional states to obtain a tremendous self-confidence that is no longer shaken by changes in the superficial appearances of things. This sense of self-assurance is not a temporary phenomenon, but an unshakable conviction that they will staunchly hold for their entire lives. Access to the dharanis of hearing and keeping the teaching. Shakyamuni Buddha next explains the second level of merits, continuing, and 1,000 times that number of Bodhisattva Mahasattvas gained access to the dharanis of hearing and keeping the teachings. Here the phrase 1,000 times is not meant to be taken literally, but is used only to indicate a very large number, as do other figurative expressions that appear later in this chapter. For example, as numerous as the particles of a single world, as numerous as the particles of a 3,000 great thousandfold world, and so forth. The word dharani can be understood to mean the ability to impede everything that is evil and advance everything that is good. Accordingly, the words gained access to the dharanis of hearing and keeping the teaching tell us that by hearing and keeping the teaching, which is to say, learning the Buddha's teachings and keeping them in mind, we can obtain the power to impede everything that is evil and advance everything that is good. As one would expect, this power greatly influences those around bodhisattvas in addition to the bodhisattvas themselves. This ability to have an influence on the lives of others is what distinguishes bodhisattvas from other living beings. The joy of teaching with unhindered eloquence. The third level of merits is the attainment of the joy of teaching with unhindered eloquence. Teaching in this way means to voluntarily explain the Buddha's teachings of one's own accord, not reluctantly on the orders of another or out of a sense of duty. Furthermore, we never teach with the ulterior motive of enhancing our reputation, or obviously out of self-interest, but do so willingly, precisely because sharing the Dharma brings us joy. This is the ideal attitude that those who share the teachings of the Buddha should have. The word unhindered signifies that nothing hinders the person who spreads the teachings. It means that one spreads the Dharma by teaching it to others, even if one is laughed and sneered at, thought ill of, or persecuted by others. Hindrances are not limited to those forces that are applied from the outside. There are also hindrances that come from within oneself. Some practitioners have enthusiasm for helping others connect with the Dharma when they are well off or have a lot of leisure time, but lose interest in others when they have no time or money to spare. This change of heart is caused by a combination of hindrances coming both from their environment and from within their own minds. On the other hand, those who have attained deep faith are able to devote themselves to the bodhisattva practice of proclaiming the sutra and spreading it far and wide without any hindrances, even if they lead a hand-to-mouth existence and have many personal worries. In addition to meaning that those who teach the sutra rise above both external and internal hindrances, unhindered indicates the ability to overcome the emotional and spiritual narrow-mindedness of those who receive the teachings. There are those who don't have the slightest inclination to believe the Buddha's teachings, people who respond with contempt from the very start, and others who listen intently but cannot make any sense of the teachings at all. The ideal person capable of sharing the sutra with many people is one who has unlimited powers to help such people see the validity of the sutra's teachings, enable them to understand, and help them to attain sincere faith in the teachings. This is what is meant by unhindered eloquence. To summarize, the joy of teaching with unhindered eloquence means always taking pleasure in explaining the true Dharma to people, overcoming both external and internal hindrances, and having the ability to help anyone understand. Dharani of immeasurable hundreds of thousands of millions of rotations. The fourth level of merits is the Dharani of immeasurable hundreds of thousands of millions of rotations, which is attained by immense numbers of bodhisattvas. Rotations here means to circulate something, that is, to transmit the underlying capacity of Dharanis to others, encouraging all living beings to advance everything that is good and impede everything that is evil, from one person to another without end. This merit is truly immense because this infinite number of bodhisattvas can become the driving force for the endless spread of the teachings. Ability to roll the non-regressing wheel of the Dharma. The fifth level of merit is the ability to roll the non-regressing wheel of the Dharma, which is also attained by a huge number of bodhisattvas, as numerous as the particles of a 3,000 great thousandfold world. As explained earlier, to roll the wheel of the Dharma means to spread the teachings as far as an endlessly rotating wheel spins. So, to roll the non-regressing wheel of the Dharma implies to continually spread the Dharma by teaching it without ever retreating even a single step, no matter what obstacles or difficulties one may encounter. Ability to roll the pure Dharma wheel. The sixth level of merit is the ability to roll the pure Dharma wheel. This means one is able to carry out the pure practices of the bodhisattvas, teaching the Dharma simply for its own sake, with no desire for any personal reward at all. Doing so is considerably difficult for ordinary people, but a person who has attained this high level of faith spontaneously undertakes the pure practices of bodhisattvas. 7th through 12th levels of merits. Continuing, the 7th level of merit is certainty of attaining supreme perfect awakening after 8 further lifetimes. In other words, this group of bodhisattvas, as numerous as the particles of 1,000 small worlds, will be able to attain supreme perfect awakening by practicing spiritual discipline for 8 more lifetimes. The following 4 levels of merits, 8th through 11th, are the certainty that immense numbers of bodhisattvas will attain supreme perfect awakening in 4 lifetimes, 3 lifetimes, 2 lifetimes, and after a single rebirth, respectively. The 12th and final level of merits is attained by innumerable other living beings, who, when learning that the lifespan of the eternal original Buddha is without beginning or end, themselves aspire to attain supreme perfect awakening. The greatest merit of religious practice. The 12 levels of merit described above can be obtained through unshakable faith in the immeasurable lifespan of the eternal original Buddha. They show us that if we only lay a foundation for faith, an infinite power to deepen that faith and extend it to others will well up within us. The Buddha promises that if we thoroughly devote ourselves to deepening our faith, we will certainly attain supreme perfect awakening. Of course, attaining supreme perfect awakening is no easy thing to accomplish. As Shakyamuni Buddha explains in this chapter, some bodhisattvas cannot attain it unless they practice over the span of 8 or more lifetimes. The additional effort necessary for ordinary people to reach supreme perfect awakening is something that is truly incalculable. Even so, it gives us great hope to know that we will certainly attain supreme perfect awakening sometime in the future, if only we embrace a right faith and endeavor to practice it. As long as we have this hope, it makes our lives happy and truly worth living. People earn or lose money, fall in and out of love, or, just having achieved a long-sought position, lose their jobs because of a trifling mistake. Some people successfully raise their children, while others tragically lose them young. If we pass through life in this way, merely repeating in vain these moments of joy and sorrow, no matter how substantial and important each moment might seem in and of itself, on our deathbeds we will almost certainly experience an indescribable sense of regret when looking back on our lives. But if our lives are suffused with the strong support of right religious faith, and we are convinced that, step by step, we can continually progress toward supreme perfect awakening, then even if our lives have their ups and downs, and seem to be but an unremitting series of recurrent joys and sorrows, we will nevertheless be able to readily pass through whatever hardships may come. We will be able to do so however long life's journey may be, and however many rebirths attaining supreme perfect awakening may require. Our existences are not limited to our lives in this world, but continue eternally, as we are reborn in each successive lifetime to come. If we could foresee the repetition of the various events of our daily lives in every lifetime to come, nothing but recurrent joys and sorrows, we would become discouraged simply by the thought of such a bleak prospect. Most people repeat the same suffering life after life without learning anything, because they cannot foresee this repetition. Precisely because of this short-sightedness, their suffering will only become greater and greater, not only if they are born in the unfortunate states of existence, hells, hungry spirits, beasts, or asuras, but even if they are reborn in the human realm. On the other hand, those who acquire true faith never grow weary of this journey of human life, nor become disgusted with it, no matter how long it may be, because they know that, step by step, they are approaching ever closer to supreme perfect awakening. They are always able to lead fulfilling lives, brimming with hope. We can regard this hope as the very greatest merit of religious practice. A person of true faith should not only strive for the goal of their own ascent to the world of Buddhas, but also always work hard to encourage as many people as possible to accompany them as traveling companions. The more people of true faith in the Buddha's teaching increase in number, the more all humanity is spiritually elevated, and the closer this world approaches to the ideal land of eternally tranquil light. Taken together, all the merits explained here in distinct detail can be boiled down to this. As we return to the text, when the world-honored one explains how the multitude of bodhisattvas obtained these great merits through confidence in the infinite lifespan of the Buddha, Mandarava and Mahamandarava flowers rain down from the sky, dancing elegantly as they scatter over the innumerable Buddhas gathered from throughout the universe, who are sitting on their lion seats. These flowers also rain down on Shakyamuni Buddha and the long-extinguished Tathagata abundant treasures, witness to the truth of Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings, seated together on the lion seat within the jeweled stupa of the precious seven substances. Mandarava and Mahamandarava flowers also scatter over the great bodhisattvas and the great assembly comprising the four groups, monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen. Scattering flowers over someone is an expression of gratitude, and is a custom that continues in India today. The rain of flowers from the sky symbolizes heavenly beings' expression of gratitude for the Buddha's teachings. The fact that they are strewed over all the great bodhisattvas and the assembly of the four groups, as well as the Buddha, also shows that both the Buddha himself, who imparts the teachings, and the disciples who receive them, are equally venerable. When we listen intently to the Buddha's teachings, or practice them wholeheartedly, we can imagine that beautiful Mandarava and Mahamandarava flowers are raining down from the skies, even if they remain invisible to us. A mist of indescribably fragrant substances including sandalwood and aloes also descends from the sky, and celestial drums echo spontaneously throughout the heavens with a sublimely deep resonance. These phenomena are all material representations of the mind that extols the teaching of the Buddha. All manner of divine garments and various kinds of necklaces, decorated with jewels, gold, and silver, also descend from the heavens and hover in midair. In homage to the Buddha, jeweled censers burning priceless incense convey a superb fragrance to everyone in the great assembly. As explained previously, in Buddhist terms, paying homage by making offerings to someone or something is an action expressing thankfulness to the Buddha and gratitude for his teachings. Flights of countless bodhisattvas hold banners and canopies over the heads of each and every Buddha gathered at the assembly. One above another, these bodhisattvas rise high up into the skies, all the way to the Brahma heaven, expressing the lofty virtues of the Buddhas. These bodhisattvas also sing numerous songs extolling the Buddhas in resonating voices. This line of bodhisattvas extending to heaven symbolizes the omnipresence of the Buddha's teaching throughout the universe, liberating all beings. At this time, Maitreya Bodhisattva rises from his seat, reveres the world-honored one by baring his right shoulder, then places his palms together and speaks in verse, the meaning of which, rendered in prose, we can understand as follows. The Buddha has just explained his infinite lifespan. It is without beginning and end, and this means that he is present everywhere, always together with us. In the past, we never heard even a single word of such a teaching. It awakens us to the great power the Buddha possesses, the power to liberate all people, and to the truth that his boundless lifespan is unfathomable. When we, the innumerable children of the Buddha, apply to ourselves the Buddha's detailed explanation of the benefits that accrue from having unshakable faith in the teaching, it makes us realize that we, too, will surely attain Buddhahood someday, and this fills us with overwhelming joy. Beginning with this preface, Maitreya continues in verse, reiterating the merits the Buddha has just enumerated in detail. If one has understood the preceding section of prose, these lines of verse are easy to understand, so here I will explain only the words and phrases that differ from those that appear above. The line of this passage of the verse that reads, "Some are abiding in the stage of non-regression," means that some of the bodhisattvas have reached a stable state of attainment from which they never fall or turn back. This phrase essentially indicates that they have attained the cognition of non-origination as discussed above. The phrase, "some attain the dharani of thousands of millions of rotations," means the same as, "some attain the dharani of immeasurable hundreds of thousands of millions of rotations," discussed above. In the lines, "some bodhisattvas, numerous as the particles of a four-continent world, will attain comprehensive wisdom after one further lifetime," the term, comprehensive wisdom, indicates the Buddha wisdom that discerns all things impartially from the standpoint of their equality. The line, "have all given rise to the supreme aspiration," means the resolution to attain the unsurpassed way, the awakening of the Buddha, and therefore means the same thing as the expression, "giving rise to the aspiration for supreme perfect awakening." The line of verse that reads, "Chakras and Brahmas, as numerous as the sands of the Ganges, have come from innumerable Buddha lands," refers to countless benevolent heavenly beings, including Chakras and Brahmas, who have gathered from countless lands throughout the universe to pay homage to the Buddha. In the line that reads, "They hang victory banners with jeweled streamers before each of the Buddhas," the term victory banners refers to the flags that were raised at the gate of the temples of a Brahmin monk who had defeated his opponent in religious debate, which I discussed in Chapter 9. This custom became routine in ancient India, and consequently it also appears in Buddhist scriptures. In any case, the basis of the Buddhist faith of the Lotus Sutra is the conviction that the lifespan of the Buddha is infinite. When the world-honored one reveals his infinite lifespan, victory banners are hung before all the Buddhas gathered at the assembly, as proof that this is the supreme teaching of the Buddha. Having repeated the Buddha's teaching in verse, Maitreya Bodhisattva concludes with the following words, which I quote directly from the text of the sutra. "Hearing that the Buddha's lifespan is immeasurable, all living beings are overjoyed." The Buddha's name is heard throughout the 10 directions, bringing abundant benefit to all living beings who are endowed with the roots of goodness that aid them in their supreme aspiration. It is not an overstatement to say that these 6 lines of verse completely encapsulate the first half of Chapter 17. This portion of verse is a great study of Maitreya Bodhisattva's ability to understand the Dharma and express what he has learned. Conclusion of the main section of the original dimension. The 1 chapter in 2 halves, the latter half of Chapter 15, all of Chapter 16, and the first half of Chapter 17 have traditionally been known as the main section of the original dimension, and more than that, the centerpiece of the entire Lotus Sutra. According to Nichiren, this section is in fact the heart of all the sutras in Buddhism. The reason this 1 chapter and 2 halves are regarded as so important is that they fully explore the very heart of the most critical of the significant issues for the Buddhist faith, what to rely on, and in so doing, they definitively determine our focus of devotion. The first half of Chapter 17 teaches us how important clarifying the focus of devotion is to our religious lives and for our own personal reassurance. The latter part of this chapter and the 11 remaining chapters of the sutra are called the applicational section of the sutra's original dimension. It answers 2 main questions. First, if we have genuine faith, what results will manifest in our lives? And second, what kinds of attitudes and approaches are necessary to uphold genuine faith? It is in this applicational section that the world-honored one commissions us to transmit this right faith to posterity. The merits that the first half of Chapter 17 teaches are the merits of attaining this genuine faith in the infinite lifespan of the Buddha. The same can be said of the merits enumerated in the latter half of Chapter 17 and the first half of Chapter 18. Beginning with the second half of Chapter 18, the sutra shifts to explaining the merits of the teaching that manifest in our own personal affairs and daily lives. The importance of the applicational section of the sutra. Some people are of the opinion that we don't need to pay attention to the merits that are taught in the applicational section of the sutra. They think that we can disregard the rest of the sutras as long as we thoroughly study this 1 chapter and 2 halves, truly understand its teachings, and have deep faith in the infinite lifespan of the Buddha, as well as that of our own Buddha nature. That would be perfectly acceptable if they could indeed practice as perfectly as they assume, for their lives of faith would then be impeccable. But is there even one such practitioner in 10,000 or 100,000 people? Whether or not what such people assert is the ideal, in reality, it is actually very difficult to practice so perfectly. Sadly, when people first hear about this ideal state of mind, it may sound unsuited to our world. But if it is explained from the standpoint of the day-to-day problems people face, the teaching will come alive for them. Herein lies the primary significance of the applicational section. Moreover, ordinary people tend to slack off, even when they are fully aware of the value of the teaching. If this awareness is only an intellectual understanding of its virtues, they may soon become apathetic about their practice. If people continually read and recite this sutra, which teaches that we can actually improve ourselves by having genuine faith and personally putting it into practice, they will be able to reapply themselves whenever their resolve begins to slacken. This is the second purpose of the applicational section of the sutra. The Buddha depends on us to spread the Lotus Sutra by sharing it with others. We can be grateful to the Buddha for this precious task. Whenever we hear his words and become conscious of his intentions through reading and reciting the sutra, we are heartened and inspired with an indescribable courage. This is the third purpose of the sutra's applicational section. The applicational section of the Lotus Sutra is precious and indispensable for the overwhelming majority of us. We should take this point to heart and study the applicational section of the original dimension of the sutra in humility rather than arrogance, with the very same enthusiasm as we study the main section. Now let us return to the text of the sutra. The world-honored one then turns to Maitreya and addresses him. Ajita, if people learn that the Buddha's lifespan is infinite and believe it for as briefly as an instant, attaining even a momentary understanding, the merits they obtain are limitless and incalculable. Imagine for a moment that there are men and women who, in order to attain supreme perfect awakening, practice all the Bodhisattva's 6 paramitas, absent the paramita of wisdom, for 800,000 million myriads of kalpas. As you know, the first 5 paramitas are generosity or donation, precept-keeping, forbearance, diligence, and meditation. Although such people have practiced the 5 paramitas for an immensely long period of time, the merits obtained by living beings who experience even a flickering instant of faith in and momentary understanding of the infinite lifespan of the Tathagata are so much greater that the difference cannot even be quantified. Those living beings who practice the 5 paramitas for such a long time do not attain even a billionth of the merits of those who believe and understand the infinite lifespan of the Buddha for as briefly as a single moment. It is impossible to compare the disparity in merit by mathematical calculation or using similes, because the basis of their respective values is completely different. If people could fathom this amount of merits, it would be impossible for them to fail to believe and understand the Buddha's infinite lifespan while on their quest for supreme perfect awakening. A note of caution is warranted here, because we risk misunderstanding this passage if we read it carelessly. At first glance, it impresses us as a contradiction. Although the Lotus Sutra strongly emphasizes the practical application of bodhisattva practice, Shakyamuni tells us that the merits of just a brief, momentary experience of faith in and understanding of the infinite lifespan of the Buddha are greater than practicing the first 5 bodhisattva paramitas for 800,000 million myriads of kalpas. But reading the Buddha's words to Maitreya carefully, from the expression, cannot be grasped through simile or calculation, we can understand the difference in the value of the merits attained by practicing the paramitas and those attained through faith in and understanding of the infinite lifespan of the Buddha. This means that there can be no comparison between these merits because the basis of their respective values belongs to completely different categories. In simple terms, the value of a $1,000 bill or a $100 bill can be compared to a single dollar bill because both are sums of money. But $100 cannot be directly compared with, say, the phenomenon of learning, because they are dissimilar in kind. It is, as the saying goes, like comparing apples and oranges. Any attempt to compare the merits attained from practicing the paramitas with those that accrue from faith in and understanding of the infinite lifespan of the Buddha is impossible for this very same reason. Obviously, practicing generosity, precept-keeping, forbearance, diligence, and meditation is remarkable, but absent the paramita of wisdom, these first 5 paramitas remain, in the final analysis, ethical practices or philosophical meditations that by themselves cannot liberate us. In other words, we cannot attain nirvana by these practices alone. In contrast to the impossibility of attaining true nirvana simply by undertaking ordinary moral practices or philosophical meditations, even for as long as decades or centuries, experiencing a glimmer of belief in the infinite lifespan of the Buddha and understanding it for just a moment assures us that the eternal original Buddha is always together with us in this world. What's more, it also convinces us that our own Buddha nature is infinite in the same way as the lifespan of the Buddha. It was never made by anyone and never perishes, because it is also the universal truth that permeates all things. This truth has been in our world since the infinite past and will always be here. The moment we realize that the original Buddha gives us the gift of life and sustains us in this way, we can suddenly enter a world of absolute peace of mind. Whereas moral practices and philosophical meditations are mundane forms of human endeavor that lack spirituality, faith in and understanding of the infinite lifespan of the Buddha is a consciousness of spiritual awakening. So the two cannot be compared, since the basis of their respective values belong to two completely different categories. Generally, commentaries have so far failed to correctly interpret what the Buddha teaches us here, but anyone who can gain a profound understanding of its true implication will clearly see that it is indeed truthful, and in no way an exaggeration, to say that the merit obtained through the practice of the five paramitas is not equal to even a billionth of the merits received through a moment of faith and understanding. The four faiths and five stages. Since antiquity, the main points of this chapter have been thought to be what are called the four faiths and five stages. Shiri, also known by the honored title Great Teacher of Mount Tiantai, one of the most influential interpreters of the Lotus Sutra and the main disseminator of the text in China, divided the content of the chapter in this way to make it easier to understand. The four faiths, or more accurately, the four ways of practicing the faith of the Lotus Sutra during the lifetime of Shakyamuni Buddha, derive from the thinking that the ideal practice of the teaching of the Lotus Sutra can be divided into four phases. 1. Experiencing a single moment of faith and understanding. 2. Attaining a general understanding of the meaning of the sutra. 3. Teaching the sutra extensively for others. And 4. Perfecting one's perspective through profound faith and understanding. The five stages, or more accurately, the five stages of practice after Shakyamuni Buddha's passing, similarly derive from the thinking that the ideal practice of the Lotus Sutra after the passing of the manifest Buddha should progress through the five following stages. 1. Rejoicing in the sutra for the first time. 2. Reading and reciting the sutra. 3. Teaching the Dharma to others. 4. Practicing the 6 paramitas accordingly. And 5. Practicing the 6 paramitas perfectly. The four faiths during Shakyamuni Buddha's lifetime. Experiencing a single moment of faith and understanding. The first of the four faiths, experiencing a single moment of faith and understanding, means realizing faith in the infinite lifespan of the Buddha and understanding it, thinking, I get it, for even a brief moment. This is just the initial stage of faith in the teaching and entry into the practice of the Lotus Sutra, but its merits are beyond limit or measure. Here the world-honored one restates what he has just taught the assembly by repeating it in verse. This passage is long, but not exceedingly difficult, so a simple paraphrase of its meaning will suffice. Consider that people seeking the wisdom of the Buddha practice the 5 paramitas: generosity or donation, precept-keeping, forbearance, diligence, and meditation, for the extremely long interval of 800,000 million myriads of kalpas. First, suppose that for a long stretch of time such people continually practice donation, making offerings to the Buddhas, multitudes of Pratyeka Buddhas, and myriads of Bodhisattvas. For example, they make offerings of rare delicacies and precious drinks, and clothing and bedding of the highest quality, and also build temples where the Buddha's teachings can be imparted. They construct their halls out of the most aromatic sandalwood, and surround them with beautifully manicured flower gardens and groves. These people continue offering such varieties of donations for a long period of time without any lapse, and transfer these merits to the Buddha way, wishing that their donation may be useful for expanding the Buddha way. These people also seek the unsurpassable way praised by all the Buddhas through keeping the precepts, the moral guidelines for behavior given by the Buddha, and by so doing, they keep their minds pure and undiluted, free of any fetters or defilements. These people likewise practice forbearance, always maintaining a state of mind that is harmonious, attuned to their surroundings and flexible, never argumentative. Their minds remain undisturbed no matter how cruelly they are treated by those around them, and even if such people are belittled and criticized by the prideful, who are arrogantly overconfident of their understanding of the Dharma, These people will maintain their composure. The resolve of such people is strong, and they wholeheartedly seek the Buddha Dharma over a long period of time with diligence. They always focus their minds by sitting in silence and stillness, meditating at secluded places for long periods of times, or contemplating the Dharma while walking, in order to remove the listlessness that obstructs the development of wisdom. As a result of exerting themselves like this, they attain states of meditation, in which their minds remain stable and undisturbed for immense spans of time. With the merits brought about by this mental concentration, these people can make the vow to attain Buddhahood. Aspiring to ascend to supreme perfect awakening and obtain the Buddha wisdom, they continue the practices of spiritual disciplines that lead to the culmination of all mental concentrations. If such people perform these practices of merit for an eternity, they will become truly outstanding human beings. But if any ordinary man or woman who learns of the infinite lifespan of the Buddha is completely certain of it for even a brief moment, and experiences a feeling of joy, the merits that this produces far surpass those of the people I described above, who practice the 5 paramitas for an eternity. If such men and women are free of all doubts about the teaching of the Buddha's infinite lifespan, and are thoroughly convinced of it, even if only for a brief moment, then each and every one of them will be able to receive the incalculable merits that I have just told you about. Bodhisattvas in particular, those who, for a vast expanse of time, have continually practiced the way of liberating themselves by liberating others, understand the spirit of the Mahayana teaching very well. Therefore, they will be convinced by the teaching of the Buddha's infinite lifespan and able to embrace it as soon as they learn of it. Men and women such as these, having received such a precious teaching, cannot help vowing to become like Shakyamuni Buddha, seeking an infinitely long lifespan for themselves, so that they can liberate living beings far into the future. They pledge, "We will all be just like he, the world-honored one, the king of the Shakya clan, who expounds the Dharma with conviction at the place of the way. In the future, when we ourselves, looked up to and respected as leaders by all living beings, arrive at the place of the way in the same manner as Shakyamuni Buddha, we will teach that the lifespan of the eternal original Buddha has no beginning or end. Anyone with a truly profound aspiration for the Buddha Dharma is pure at heart and upright in character, which is to say, unpretentious and honest. Such people are learned, having mastered all the Buddha's various teachings, which they embrace as dharanis, the ability to impede everything that is evil and advance everything that is good, and personally put these into practice. Such people do not merely understand the meaning of the Buddha's words, but also attain a thorough grasp of their very essence. Living beings such as these will not have even a shadow of doubt about what I have taught you here." The beginning of the paraphrase above includes the sentence, "These people continue offering such varieties of donations for a long period of time without any lapse, and transfer these merits to the Buddha way." Transferring merits is a particularly important phrase that calls for an explanation. Transfer of merit is parinamana in Sanskrit. Pari means in the direction of or toward, and namana means transformation or transfer. Accordingly, transfer of merit is the act of turning or redirecting the merit one would have obtained for oneself toward others and transferring it to them for the purpose of their attainment of Buddhahood. For example, when we recite the Lotus Sutra, it purifies us by planting the teaching of the Buddha deep within our minds. From this standpoint, sutra recitation is a spiritual practice originally undertaken for one's own attainment of Buddhahood. But if we recite the sutras in memorial service for our ancestors, it transfers the merit we would have ordinarily received to our ancestors to help them attain Buddhahood. For this reason, sutra recitation in memorial services for the dead is called transfer of merit. Transfer of merit is not to be performed only for the sake of the dead. From the standpoint of its underlying principle, transfer of merit is also applicable to living people, and doing such a transfer is in fact even more meaningful. If we recite the sutras hoping for the happiness of all humanity, we transfer the merits we would normally receive to all human beings. Consequently, transferring merit is the donation of the merit of the Dharma, which we should regard as our most valuable treasure, to other people. It is a far more self-sacrificing and noble deed than giving money or other material offerings to others. Transferring merit is the supreme act of generosity. If we give money or other material offerings to people because of an expectation that the merits of this donation will find their way back to us, it is the lowest form of generosity. When we donate in the hope that it may increase another person's happiness, even a little, It qualifies as generosity in a normative sense according to most ethical standards. But when we donate to others with the wish that it awakens the receiver's Buddha nature, and with the hope that by benefiting people in succession, from one to the next, our donation will eventually lead to the universal accomplishment of the Buddha way throughout our world, then it is the highest form of generosity. This is the very reason the passage above on donation contains the line, and transfer these merits to the Buddha way. There are two other points that I must add. The first is that, although transferring merit should be done entirely for the sake of others, ultimately, the merit that results from such acts of generosity return to the donor without fail. The second is that, in the end, the greatest transfer of merit to one's ancestors is to become exemplary people who carry out the practices of the Bodhisattva. Nothing would bring more joy and peace of mind to our ancestors than knowing that we ourselves are elevating ourselves. For this reason, we must not stop at simply reciting the sutras and the Odaimoku, but must also endeavor to purify and elevate ourselves through our deeds and our attitudes, attaining a general understanding of the meaning of the sutra. Then the world-honored one, returning to prose, continues his explanation of the merits of the four faiths. Again, Ajita, if anyone learns the teaching that my lifespan is infinite, and grasps the implications of these words, the merits that person receives will be so enormous as to be unfathomable, and will enable them to obtain the supreme wisdom of the Tathagatas. This phase is one step beyond the initial single moment of faith and understanding. It entails not just experiencing a momentary realization of the infinite lifespan of the Buddha, and understanding it in a general sense, but also comprehending the tremendous implications of the teaching. The infinite lifespan of the Buddha means that everywhere and always, in whatever world we are reborn into, the Buddha is continually with us, constantly teaching the Dharma to us. Furthermore, because our own Buddha nature is just like the eternal original Buddha, uncreated and unceasing, having no beginning and no end, if we only have faith in the Lotus Sutra and practice it, we will surely attain the same exalted state as Shakyamuni Buddha. It is only because our minds are covered by clouds of delusion that we are not conscious of the Buddha's infinite lifespan, nor are we aware of the Buddha's constantly watching over and safeguarding our efforts. This is why we become apathetic. But if, cloud by cloud, we sweep away that obscurity, there is no doubt that one day we ourselves will be able to see and become one with the original Buddha. We may not be able to accomplish Buddhahood in just one or even 2 lifetimes, but once we realize that the Buddha is always with us, and understand that our own Buddha nature is also timeless, we will gain the hope and courage to always travel the path of progress. This is not just an issue of elevating ourselves. If all the people in the world shared this feeling and could proceed hand in hand toward the same goal of Buddhahood for the benefit of ourselves as well as all others, humanity would be able to realize a truly peaceful and ideal society here on this earth. When, in like manner, we can comprehend the tremendous implications of the seemingly straightforward teaching that the Buddha's lifespan is infinite, we are one step closer to the wisdom of the Buddha. Chiri called this phase attaining a general understanding of the meaning of the sutra, teaching the sutra extensively to others. Next is the phase of teaching the sutra extensively to others. Shakyamuni Buddha continues, how much more so will be the case with those who learn the teachings of the sutra in greater depth, encourage others to learn it, embrace the sutra in their own hearts, and inspire others to do the same, copy it themselves, and aspire others to copy it, and offer flowers, fragrances, necklaces, banners, flags, silk canopies, scented oils, and lamps to the text of the sutra. The merits these people will receive are infinite and boundless, which will allow them to one day realize the Buddha's all-inclusive wisdom, which perceives both equality and difference. These practitioners of the Lotus Sutra have progressed another step beyond understanding the sutra's meaning. They not only realize the purpose of the sutra's teaching, revealing the infinite lifespan of the Buddha, but also go on to learn the Buddha's Dharma comprehensively, inscribe it firmly upon their hearts so as to never forget it, and devote themselves to religious practice such as copying the sutra. But they do not limit these practices to themselves. They also encourage others to undertake these practices. Hence, this level of living the faith of the Lotus Sutra is called teaching the sutra extensively to others. This passage also calls for making various offerings to the text of the Lotus Sutra. The act of making offerings to the text of the sutra is a way of expressing our heartfelt feelings of gratitude for the teaching. Here we read a list of many exquisite substances and beautiful ornamentations that should be given as ceremonial offerings. We should understand that in the act of offering these material things, we give symbolic expression to our mind of sincere gratitude to the Buddha. As we ourselves are physical existences, it should be no surprise that if we have feelings of gratitude, it is natural for us to experience the need to give expression to them in material form. Perfecting one's perspective through profound faith and understanding. The next phase is perfecting one's perspective through profound faith and understanding. The world-honored one continues, Ajita, those men and women who learn that my lifespan is infinite and respond with deep faith and profound understanding will perceive that I am always on Divine Eagle Peak expounding the Dharma, surrounded by great assemblies of bodhisattvas and shravakas. They will also see the Saha world, covered by flat plains of lapis lazuli, crisscrossed by roads bordered with gold and lined with beautiful jeweled trees. All the buildings in this Saha world are decorated with every kind of gem, and assemblies of bodhisattvas can be seen living within. The ability to attain this perspective of the world is a sign of their profound faith and understanding. This passage describes the state of consciousness we attain in the innermost depths of our hearts and minds, when we have deep faith in and profound realization of the infinite lifespan of the Buddha. For example, the Buddha's words, those men and women will perceive that I am always on Divine Eagle Peak, indicates the development of the deep-seated conviction that the Buddha always dwells wherever we are at the moment, and we are keenly aware of the Buddha continually teaching us through our circumstances and the people around us. The depiction of our Saha world as a beautiful and ideal land indicates that, when our faith and understanding reach this depth, the Saha world is, just as it is, the land of eternally tranquil light. When our hearts and minds are filled with the joy and the Dharma that the Buddha's teachings bring, the actual world of the present is transformed into a place that we cannot help finding blissful. In this state of mind, we see beauty wherever we look, and everyone appears to us as bodhisattvas, because we can perceive people's intrinsic Buddha nature without being swayed by any distasteful superficial impressions. The highest state of consciousness that a practitioner of the Lotus Sutra can attain is called the phase of perfecting one's perspective through profound faith and understanding. Perspective here means a viewpoint or outlook on things, our view of existence or our worldview. Because people have profound faith in the infinite lifespan of the Buddha, in this phase, they can perfect their perspective on existence and the world, seeing things in accord with the Buddha's teachings, and always dwell in joy in the Dharma. As a result, in essence, our Saha world becomes the land of eternally tranquil light. The 5 stages of practice after Shakyamuni Buddha's passing. After concluding his discussion of the 4 faiths, Shakyamuni Buddha explains the ideal practice that should be pursued by practitioners of the Lotus Sutra after his passing. The 5 stages of practice after Shakyamuni Buddha's passing. Rejoicing in the Sutra for the first time. The first stage is rejoicing in the Sutra for the first time. As Shakyamuni Buddha elaborates, after the Tathagata passes away, people who learn this teaching are open to it and respond with sincere joy instead of doubt or criticism. You should know that this is a sign they have already attained true faith, profound faith and understanding. If we have a cerebral understanding of the Buddha's teachings, or just intellectually accept them, we cannot consider such understanding to be spirituality or religious faith. We have not entered the domain of faith until we feel the joy of gratitude for the Buddha's teachings, and because we experience feelings of joy when listening to the teachings, this state of mind is called rejoicing in the Sutra for the first time. This stage is so important that its merits are discussed in detail in Chapter 18, the merits of rejoicing. Reading and reciting the Sutra. Shakyamuni Buddha proceeds to the next stage, reading and reciting the Sutra, explaining as follows. Because people have attained true faith simply by initially responding with joy, how much greater will their merits be if they properly receive and embrace the teaching, reading and reciting it. People who practice in this way carry the Tathagata on their shoulders. Ajita, these people no longer have to revere me by raising stupas in temples or monasteries, and it is also no longer necessary for them to honor monks with the 4 types of offerings: clothing, food and drink, bedding, and medicine. Why? Because these men and women who receive and embrace this teaching, reading and reciting it, have essentially done the equivalent of making offerings to monks by constructing stupas and building monasteries for them and paying homage to them. The following offerings are the ultimate ways to pay homage. Construct out of the 7 precious substances a magnificent stupa, a tower that becomes narrower and narrower as it reaches upward to the Brahma heavens. To enshrine a relic of the Buddha and decorate it with all sorts of ornaments. Make all manner of offerings, including incense, music, and dancing, and extol the relic with beautiful voices singing songs of praise. But receiving and embracing, reading and reciting this teaching brings the same merit as paying homage by making such offerings for incalculable thousands of millions of kalpas. Moving a step beyond rejoicing in the sutra for the first time, Shakyamuni Buddha teaches us that there is nothing more eminent than the spiritual mindset of the practitioner who firmly receives and embraces its teaching, reading it devotedly and reciting it again and again. Reading and reciting a sutra means not just reading it aloud, but learning it thoroughly and savoring its words, repeating them to ourselves over and over within our hearts. Accordingly, this stage of practicing the Lotus Sutra is known as the level of reading and reciting the sutra. Teaching the Dharma to others. The next stage we arrive at is teaching the Dharma to others. Shakyamuni Buddha continues his explanation to Maitreya. Ajita, if anyone who learns of this teaching receives and embraces it, and copies it themselves and successfully encourages others to copy it, that person has accumulated merit similar to constructing monasteries for monks, furnishing them with splendid temple halls built of red sandalwood, surrounding them with ornate gardens and groves, pristine pools for bathing, promenades for walking meditation, and chambers for use as meditation cells, and equipping them with all conveniences, including clothing, food and drink, bedding, and medicine for all its monks. Practitioners of the Lotus Sutra have accumulated the same manner of merits as if they had actually offered innumerable numbers of such monasteries to me and my monks. For this reason, if after my passing people receive and embrace this teaching, read and recite it, teach it to others, copy it, encourage others to copy it, and express their gratitude for the teaching with offerings to the text of the sutra, there is no need for them to actually construct stupas and temples, build monasteries for monks, or revere them with offerings. In this stage, having received and embraced the teaching, we gradually deepen our appreciation of the teaching's value as we fervently read and recite it, and we come to feel that we must share it with others. Sharing the Buddha's teachings is not necessarily limited to spoken communication. We can also introduce the Buddha's teachings to others through the written word, including publishing them in newspapers or magazines. Even a person who is inarticulate or a poor writer can demonstrate the value of the Buddha's teachings through their personal conduct without ever uttering a word. These are all ways of sharing the Buddha's teachings that are included within teaching the Dharma to others. The way of practicing the faith of the Lotus Sutra by teaching the Dharma to others is a stage at which we go beyond just improving ourselves and working for our own liberation, and first set foot on the path of the Bodhisattva practices of benefiting others and assisting their liberation. It is natural, then, that the merits one obtains at this point on the path are far greater than those at the stage of reading and reciting the sutra. A few more words of clarification concerning this stage are in order. In both this and previous stages, the Buddha says that men and women who receive and embrace, as well as practice the Lotus Sutra, no longer have any need to raise stupas of the precious 7 substances to enshrine as relics, or build monasteries, or make offerings to monks, reiterating what he already explained in Chapter 10, Teachers of the Dharma. Through these words, the Buddha teaches us that sincere, intangible offerings of faith are worth far more than formalistic material offerings that do not come from the heart. He teaches us that the greatest offering one can make to the Buddha is to receive his teachings in faith, put them into practice, and spread them by sharing them with others. First of all, we must take this teaching firmly to heart. The next thing we must keep in mind is that, although Shakyamuni Buddha tells us that we do not have to enshrine his relics because his whole body is contained within his teaching, this does not mean that we have no need for the material aspects of practicing the Buddha's teachings. For instance, Dharma centers or traditional Buddhist institutions such as temples or monasteries. People who grasp the sutras only intellectually are apt to interpret the Buddha's words here literally. This is a cold, rational way of thinking that lacks a sense of gratitude and reverence for the Buddha. Such people are taken with Buddhism only as a theory, and have closed their minds to the spiritual practices of faith and devotion. People who have faith in Shakyamuni Buddha and are devoted to him and his teachings should make the utmost effort to follow those teachings, receiving them in faith, putting them into practice, and sharing them with people for the sake of society as a whole. At the same time, we cannot help making material offerings of appreciation to our great benevolent teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha, who guides us on the unsurpassable way, and to the many bodhisattvas who have assisted the Buddha throughout the ages. As I have often repeated in this book, because we are embodied existences, the deeper the influence of the Buddha's teachings, the more we are driven to give tangible outward expression to the feelings in our hearts. This is why Buddhists always adorn their altars with various offerings, revere the Buddha at their altars every morning and evening, and express their admiration for him through various specific practices, practicing the 6 paramitas accordingly. The Buddha next teaches us the following level that we can attain by further deepening our religious practice. As I have just explained to you, the merits of receiving and embracing this teaching and then striving to share it are truly unimaginable. But the merits will be even greater if, to the extent possible, you also personally practice the 6 paramitas: generosity, precept-keeping, forbearance, diligence, meditation, and wisdom. The merit of people who undertake this will be the greatest of all, as limitless as the infinite extent of space in all directions, north, south, east, and west, and the 4 intermediate points of the compass, as well as above and below. Such people will quickly attain all-embracing wisdom, the highest wisdom that integrates both the perception of equality and the insight into difference. This is a stage of practicing the 6 paramitas accordingly. Practicing accordingly does not mean that one fully carries out all the paramitas, but that in addition to receiving and embracing, reading, reciting, and teaching the sutras to others, one practices the 6 paramitas to the extent that one can. At this stage, undertaking all the paramitas fully is still considerably difficult, so the Buddha teaches us to commence our practice of the paramitas by beginning with whatever we are capable of doing, in proportion to our means and circumstances. The Buddha never urges us to do the impossible, no matter what. He teaches us that we can deepen our practice by degrees, starting with whatever we are capable of doing. In Chapter 2, Skillful Means, the Buddha tells us that living beings can embark on the Buddha way from anywhere, through any means, and that even something as simple as a child playfully piling up sand to make a Buddha stupa can be an entrance to the Buddha way. One more point that we must not overlook is that the 5 paramitas seem to have been de-emphasized in order to stress the merits obtained in the stage of experiencing a single moment of faith and understanding, the first of the 4 types of faith discussed above. But in the present category of practicing the 6 paramitas accordingly, all the 6 paramitas become extremely important elements of our spiritual discipline. We may wonder why this is so. Shakyamuni possessed the supreme wisdom of a Buddha and was a great teacher. The disciples who were personally instructed by the Buddha during his lifetime were capable of deep trust in the teachings simply through the faith and understanding they attained by appreciating those teachings when they heard them. In their practice of the 5 paramitas, the Buddha's disciples were also able to progress greatly because Shakyamuni taught them directly with his perfect wisdom. Although it may be a bit of an oversimplification, the Buddha's first disciples received wisdom directly from the Buddha, and so they had only to practice the remaining 5 paramitas: generosity, precept-keeping, forbearance, diligence, and meditation. It is not difficult to imagine that they could practice these perfections day and night with great enthusiasm and joy in the Dharma, because they did so in the presence of Shakyamuni Buddha, the model of human perfection and the greatest teacher. Today, however, we must study and practice his teachings entirely through our own power in an age of the decline of the Dharma, without the physical presence of Shakyamuni Buddha. We must seek wisdom in the teachings he left to us, and we have to realize it for ourselves. Compared with the time when the manifest Buddha Shakyamuni was alive, practicing all 6 paramitas, including wisdom, becomes critically important for us today. This is why, in this stage, the Buddha, in his compassionate wisdom, strongly urges us to practice all the 6 paramitas. Although practitioners at this stage begin to undertake the 6 paramitas, their way of practicing them differs according to their individual circumstances, and there are situations in which people can practice them only partially. This is why this stage is called practicing the 6 paramitas accordingly, because the perfections are a supplement to the primary practice of receiving and embracing, reading, reciting, and teaching the sutra to others. Practicing the 6 paramitas perfectly. When we reach the most advanced stage of practicing the faith, the 6 paramitas become one of our basic practices, and we undertake them fully. Shakyamuni Buddha explains the merits of this stage as follows. Suppose that people not only receive and embrace, read, recite the sutra, teach the sutra to others, copy the sutra themselves, and encourage others to do so, but also go on to practice perfectly 3 types of generosity: material donation, building stupas and monasteries for people seeking the teaching, the donation of the body, extolling the many merits of the bodhisattvas, and donation of the Dharma, using many examples from the past to explain the profound meaning of the Lotus Sutra. And moreover, suppose that at the same time they also practice precept keeping perfectly, by purifying themselves, by firmly upholding the moral guidelines of the Buddha, fully practice forbearance, by associating with people, by being harmonious and flexible, and never becoming angry whatever happens, and also practice diligence perfectly, by resolutely applying themselves to learning all the good teachings, as well as practicing meditation perfectly, by being firmly resolved and attaining numerous deep meditative states, by always remaining mindful of the Buddha Dharma, and finally, practicing wisdom perfectly, by seeking the wisdom of the Buddha with a nimble mind, penetrating its depths, and appropriately answering people's difficult questions in accord with the truth. Such people will have perfected all the 6 paramitas, and will have attained the same spiritual level as the Buddha himself at the time when he sat down under the Bodhi tree at Bodh Gaya. Such people will be close to supreme perfect awakening. This stage of practicing the 6 paramitas perfectly means practicing all of them flawlessly. As Shakyamuni Buddha affirms, anyone who advances to this stage of practice is close to attaining supreme perfect awakening, and this is why the Buddha tells Maitreya, Ajita, wherever these people practice, at the place where they sit, stand, or walk in meditation, you should raise a stupa to praise their activities, and then all the human and heavenly beings will make offerings to that stupa, as if it contained the relics of a Buddha. When explaining the 3rd stage, teaching the Dharma to others, the Buddha said that practitioners no longer needed to raise stupas for him, but now he declares that a stupa should be constructed wherever someone practices the 6 paramitas perfectly, and also that such stupa should be revered in the same way that people venerate a stupa that enshrines the Buddha's relics. Shakyamuni Buddha says this to emphasize the importance of practicing his teachings and sharing them with others in the age of the decline of the Dharma. This is precious advice from the Buddha. The Buddha then restates in verse what he has just explained. This verse contains several difficult terms, but readers who go over it several times should be able to figure them out if they have a good grasp of the meaning of the preceding prose section, because these terms are similar. The chapter concludes with these final 4 lines of verse. When such places are occupied by these Buddha children, they are in use by the Buddha himself. There he is, always present, whether walking, sitting, or reclining. The Buddha regards people who have sincere faith in and understanding of his teachings as his true children. He calls them Buddha children and tells us that the Buddha himself uses the places where they dwell as his own abode, always present there, practicing together with them, and being similarly mindful of the Dharma while walking, sitting in meditation, and reclining while resting. If we immerse ourselves in the true faith, the Buddha comes to wherever we are and dwells there with us. For the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra, there is nothing more joyous and nothing more precious. We rise together with the Buddha in the morning and turn in together with the Buddha at night. This is truly the ideal spiritual life.